Can you all hear me okay? Yes. Awesome. Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Natalie Swachina. I'm our Associate Deputy Director here at the Craft Center. Thank you for coming out tonight. This is our first Craft Perspectives program. This is a new program that we've been designing for artists as a means to network, to chat, to share your practice, have a chance to connect with each other. We really want this to be an open conversation, a way for you to share what you're doing, share it with others, get feedback, make connections, and just have a nice time. So we have 5 presenters tonight, all who have signed up from throughout the community. We'll have about 3 minutes for each presentation. We'll leave some time for questions at the end that you might have, or conversations, comments. We are hoping to wrap up by 7 so that you have time to chat and look at more of the works that are up here at the front. We also do have our exhibitions open, Designing Motherhood, and our Valentine's Day retail collection is up as well. So feel free to grab a drink or a snack when you want, and we're going to head and get started. Okay, so our first presenter tonight is Ryan Trussell, who is a clay artist. So I'm going to hand it over to Ryan.
Thank you. Can you hear me if I leave it like that? Okay. So yeah, my name is Ryan Trussell. I'm originally from Oklahoma. I'm living as an expatriate down here in Texas these last 12 years or so. And I started out as a photographer, actually, at the University of Arkansas. But my interests were all in the messy processes. I loved the darkroom. I wanted to get into like alternative processes and stuff like that. But this was in the early 2000s when everything was going digital. The professor wasn't interested in all that stuff. And so I ended up going over to the ceramics department. Ceramics is an important material to me. And so, but recently I've been wanting to get back into photography. And so I've been developing this process. I don't know what to call it yet, but it's a clay-based photo emulsion. And so like this, the way this was done, I'm going to blow my 3 minutes, but like, so the way this was done was I put a tar paper mat over the whole, I coated the whole paper in the emulsion. And then I put a tar paper mat over it with just opening the shape of the pot. And then I used clay slip on top of the emulsion, and then I exposed it to the sun and then developed it. And so all of this where the tar paper was washed out, and most of where the slip went washed out. And so I'm left with this sort of image. I did it with a number of things. I have a lot of toys around my house, so like this one is Nerf bullets. I have several studio assistants. Here's another one with clay slip. This is one that had no secondary application. It was just the tar paper. And so I've been doing this a lot lately. It's still kind of a process, a lot of testing. Oh yeah, here's Hot Wheel tracks, Legos, different slip applications, like a larger slip application. And so I really enjoy, I'm not a real precise guy. I really enjoy working sort of big strokes, hard edges kind of thing. But this, I've found that this does actually lend itself to a more finer, detailed photography as well. This is a picture that I took of my mom. She just turned 80. I took this on her 80th birthday just with my phone, and then reversed it into a negative in Lightroom and just printed it on a transparency with an inkjet printer. And then this is a different color clay, but it's the same process. And I've been able to get even better detail than this. So it's still very much kind of an ongoing process. And that's about it. That's what I wanted to talk about.
You did a great job.
Thanks.
Your time. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Ryan?
How did you decide to come up with this method? Did you always have whenever you were photographing or wanting to experiment with this method?
No. I'm actually I'm also a quilter, and I went through a phase a while back of dyeing fabric with cloth or dyeing fabric with clay, and then using that just the dyed fabric and undyed fabric together for kind of a two-tone effect. And I was looking for something to get a more saturated color on the fabric with the clay. And so I played around with different like litho inks and stuff like that, but then also I thought maybe like gum bichromate, which is an alternative photo process. But like I said, I have several studio assistants, and potassium dichromate and ammonium dichromate are pretty gnarly stuff. And so I found a non-toxic alternative to gum bichromate. This is called Chiba, that was developed in Japan in 2007. And so it's a version of that process that I've been using. And at a certain point, it was just more interesting to me to start doing it on paper and just calling it a photograph instead of trying to make it work on fabric. Though I guess that idea is still in there somewhere.
Yeah, that was my question. Have you tried it on fabric? How is it different on paper versus fabric?
It washes out a lot more readily on paper, and because on paper you don't have to worry about it being wash fast. Like with a quilt, like I do quilts that I intend for people to use and wash and treat as you would a blanket, as opposed to a piece of art. And so I was looking for something that was wash fast, light fast. And also, the emulsion is kind of like if you come up here, you can sort of feel it. It's a little bit stiff, and it stays that way on fabric too. So like it's not soft the way you would have like a screen printing water-based ink or something. Oh.
What kind of clay bodies are you using?
I use all kinds. This is. Anybody that's into clay knows red art. Like, this is just red art. Red art that's been calcined. Like, I fire it first just as a powder, and then I've used it raw too, but it's a duller kind of brownish color. Oh, I brought my sketchbook too. Like, lots of tests for this stuff. Like, a lot of fun stuff. Sketchbook's been fun lately.
Cool.
And then this is a brown clay from California. It's called Barnard clay. And then my buddy Dylan gave me some wild clay that he dug on the banks of the Arkansas River. I've used that. It's really black. If you fire it, it turns this sandy brown. It's not very nice. But if you leave it raw, you get these great grays and blacks and everything. I'm actually, I've got a show of work that I haven't made yet coming up in May that's all going to be with that. It's all going to be with that black clay. It's all just going to be grays and blacks and everything.
Where's your show at?
It is at the Gray Photography, the Art Center at the Gray Photography Studio in St. John, Kansas, which I believe has a population of about 198 people. But it's a great little building. It's a brand new art center, and
Cool.
I kind of responded to the building and built an idea and then pitched it to them, and they were like, we don't have anything going on, so sure. So.
Cool. Okay. Any last questions for Ryan? Any comments or anything? Cool. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for sharing your practice.
Thank you.
I do have a question. What kind of paper do you use that will...
It's mostly all cotton. It's all watercolor paper because it needs to stand up to washing.
Yeah, okay.
I've used some that's cheaper. It's not all cotton, and it works just fine. But the cotton stuff stays a little crisper. So I'll leave those up here for now.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Well, that was a great start to our evening. Naomi, you're next. This is Naomi Naomi Chu, and you are also a clay artist. And so, do you want to move your works closer, or is that okay?
No, those spots are generally found kind of in the background, so I think that's perfect.
Okay, I'll hand it over to
Yeah,
you.
thank you. So I'm Naomi Choi, and I'm happy to be here. I am recovering from food poisoning from last night, so I'm going to do my best to get through. But this is such a great opportunity. I really just could not miss it. So my project that I'm working on is kind of an ambitious, large-scale project. It's the first of this kind that I've ever attempted. It is also the first project that is deeply personal to me. I used to teach political philosophy at the University of Houston in my previous life. I taught political philosophy for probably 23 years, and it was the week that Trump was inaugurated in 2020. I decided I can't do this anymore. This is not the answer. It's not really what I want to spend this life doing. So I made a switch. I found yoga, which helped me a great deal at that time. And the yoga helped me to dig in a little bit deeper. And when I found clay, I just never looked back. So it's been a really intense 4 years, 5 years now. And my project, let me talk about my project. It is a fermentation project. I love this idea of fermentation. It is the interplay of life and death, where there's being and also becoming. And my project for the multiplicity class that I'm taking right now over at the Glasell is to create a series of ongi pots. Those are Korean fermentation pots. Even today, if you were to go to Korea, you can see them in the rural countryside. Families will they're used for storage, they're also used for fermentation. Kimchi is stored in ongi pots. I'm going to create a bunch of them. The big project is 108. That's a meaningful number in meditation and in yoga. But for the spring, I plan to create about 24 to 35 pieces. And they're going to be arranged in stages, where in every stage it's telling the story of an aesthetic that I encountered. So it's an autobiographical story, it's an assimilation story, but unlike the way you might think of assimilation as a kind of erasure of something you once were and for the adoption of something that you're not, I hope to be able to show through this kind of installation the process of becoming. And it is deeply idiosyncratic. It is highly personal. There's no theoretical statement one could really make about these concepts. But I'm going to have these pots through 8 stages. The first will be 4, not unlike kind of the more traditional, the darker ongi pots that you see on the table there. And that represents my parents and my sister and me as we came over to the States. And then the next stage would be growing up in New York City in the 80s and the 90s. And then the next stage is like too many years living in San Francisco for graduate school. And then my first job was in Alabama, and so that piece will be just one that is half black and half white, because segregation was the underlying issue, the underlying sort of motivation in society. It seemed to define so many social relations and the life that I had and the people I encountered, all of those things. And so on and so forth. The last one will be hopefully the biggest one. I'm working right now in just getting comfortable with throwing more and more clay each time, honing the form, but also increasing the amount of material I can handle in a given go. And so the last one should be maybe like 100 pounds, and that one will be unglazed. It'll be the present and hopefully indicate that there's some openness there. I can go on and on forever, but I'm probably coming close to time.
Yeah, that's good. We leave some time for questions or
Yeah.
comments. Thank you, Naomi.
Sure.
Any questions for Naomi?
Yeah.
So I'm super curious on what is your dream space for it to end up in, if you have one.
No pedestals.
Okay. I love that. I love that.
I almost, like, they belong in the background. So I'm happy to have them in a space where there's actually a different exhibit, and they're just kind of there. But at the same time, I envision the larger scale work. I don't think I'll be done with that until probably another, 22 months.
Yeah.
It does need to be featured. I can imagine it kind of moving in a line, and you'll see the sizes, and you'll see the transition from one to the next. And there's something about the movement, the very specific movement from each stage to stage, but also piece to piece, that I think that I would like to feature. So I'm not sure, but it's a great question, and it helps me think about foreground and background kind of ideas. Thanks. Yeah, Angel.
I kind of love the idea that you were talking about in terms of like taking the concept of assimilation from losing part of self, but instead you're sort of gaining these experiences. And as the pots, as you make them, are going to reflect like this sort of like wealth of experience.
I hope to.
You know, I think that's very interesting. And also the sort of the container, like the reference of this like traditional vessel.
Form, yeah.
You know, being a place of containment, but also like a celebration of like cultural wholeness. Like the fact that the vessel, like will the vessel change as the project goes on?
So I've had this very thought of like, should I allow for this constant form to have some kind of variation? Or should I be working towards honing a single form, repeating that across the board? And I think there's a question about technical skill here. I want to get to a point where I can do it, repeat it identically, so that I can decide when and where I don't want to. So that's kind of a goal for me, is to work on a form. I've actually just been playing with form. There is a traditional kind of shape, but it's a family of shapes, really. There's ongi finishes, there's ongi clays, and there's ongi, pots that are kind of, always recognizably ongi, but it isn't a specific shape necessarily. Part of it is function, that it's storing food, it's fermenting food, it's, so yeah, I'm definitely thinking about this whole idea of like, when I have the constant form with variation in surface technique and glazes, how constant does that form need to be? And how much can I vary the form and still have a vessel be recognizable as an ongi? There are some things, certain stages that I'm envisioning. It's not going to have a dark finish. It's going to be different. And is it still an ongi? How far can you go before it's no longer that form? So I'm definitely playing around with those ideas. Thank you.
I saw a hand up. Did I see a hand up over here? Ah, there we go.
How are you gonna throw 100 pounds, or is that gonna be something that you...
In parts, piecemeal, yeah. So it'll be like a base piece that you do first, and you measure that out. You put it to the side, and then you do a ring. And then when it's firm enough, you add the ring, you flip it over onto your base piece, and you can keep going. It's working in composites. You can, as long as you're managing that moisture content so that the clay is stiff enough to hold its weight as you add to it. I don't want to say there's no limit, but it's almost like there's no limit.
So are they all hand built, or?
Yeah, they'll all be hand built. I have two methods. Sometimes I coil pots, and sometimes I throw them.
Okay. Great. Any last questions for Naomi?
I'm a little curious. You started out talking about yoga. Like, is there any connection between the two things?
Just that it's me, that it was my progression through my life. But it's two very different cultures and philosophies. But for me, it's how I made sense of who I am, and I think in many ways what I'm becoming. So that's where the 108 come in. But otherwise, it's not. There isn't like.
What is the 108 about? I'm not a yoga practitioner.
Yeah, it's just a significant number in yogic philosophy. It's actually not just Hindu philosophy, but it goes back to lots of ancient cultures. There's ideas about the sun, earth, and moon, and being whole. That is, like 108 is a significant number. If you've seen mala beads that people use for meditation, there's always 108. It's one of these numbers that's like divisible by like lots of numbers. I'm not a math person. Like 12 times 9, so lots of times meditations will be repeated 12 times, and there's a series of 9. So yeah, so that's where the 108 comes in, and that's also ambitious.
The reason I asked was that, like, I think yoga is a lot about breath. Is that right? About breathing?
Absolutely, yeah.
And one of the things that I've heard is distinctive about Ongi is that they breathe.
Oh my God, thank you.
That's why
That's incredible.
That's why they ferment.
That's
right?
beautiful,
Because the
yeah.
lid doesn't.
That's
the lid
right.
sits loosely, and so.
Yep. So
the
air
pot
can
breathes.
go out, and even liquid as it ferments, it can seep out. Yeah, I'm trying to understand to what extent the clay body is meant to also breathe, because I've seen that somewhere, but I think that it's a translation error. I don't think that you can have like the vessels themselves breathing. But yeah, the lids, it's just gravity holding it in place. It's not airtight. So that's beautiful. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, that's great. That's
Thanks.
a part of why we're doing this is to create more connections. Thank you, Naomi. Awesome. That's the whole point, is to create conversation amongst us. So y'all are doing this without me even having to try. Thank you so much, Naomi, for sharing that. Next up is Lorena Angula. I was trying. And while you're starting, I'm going to pull up your Instagram so you have that as well.
Hi, everybody. As she said, my name is Lorena Angulo. I'm from Mexico. I am naturalized U.S. citizen now, but Mexico doesn't go anywhere. I'm still Mexican, So I took my first metals-smithing class in San Antonio, Texas. I just moved to this area in October after living in San Antonio for 20 years. I was studying advertisement in El Paso, Texas, in my old days. I don't want to blind you, don't worry. But life took a turn, and I couldn't finish my major over there, my bachelor's. And at the end, I got married, had kids, moved to San Antonio, and I wanted to study art. Because growing up in Mexico, I had the fortune to move in every state because of my father's work. So I lived half a year in one place, another year in another place. It was crazy, but at the same time, now that I'm older, I was exposed to so much of the different art, folk art in my country, that when I went to San Antonio to Southwest School of Art, that now is part of UTSA, I took my first art classes. And I took painting, and I took metalsmithing. And that's when I realized that I'm not a painter at all. So I stayed in metalsmithing, and I was very fortunate to meet a group of ladies that they were called the Ursulines. They've been there forever in that school, and I was the baby in the group. I was always scared because I never took metalsmithing in my life, But I love jewelry. As all Mexicans, we love big things, But they embraced me. They never criticized that I was a newbie. I didn't know what I was doing at the beginning, but they like that the way I am, being from my country, maybe, I don't know, the Latino thing. We just throw ourselves, and if we don't know what we're doing, we find out in the way. We take all the opportunities because we never know if they will come back again. So I was making projects that maybe they were not suited for a beginner, but I learned so much, ruining pieces, soldering, making stuff. But the way I design and my creative voice since the beginning has been very influenced by my culture. So all my jewelry, all my work, even if it's figurines in paper, ceramic, or jewelry, is very Mexican. Whoever sees it is like, me of a Milagro heart from Mexico or a pottery from Puebla, and I'm like, yeah, I'm Mexican. So my jewelry and my artwork reflects who I am and where I come from. And I love that because I like to teach people in this country and other countries how the culture is and the misconceptions they may have about some things in my country. And I like to educate them through my craft. And I have done some shows, I sell my jewelry in shows around the States. And the first shocking for me was my jewelry that is inspired in the Day of the Dead. And hearing people saying Halloween jewelry. No, it's not Halloween jewelry. And no, it's not evil jewelry. And we're not making evil the God. That's not it is. That's not what the Day of the Dead is. So I love to educate people. I don't get offended. They're just not educated enough to know what the meaning of that is. That's why I love my jewelry that way. I have the opportunity to tell them a story. So when I'm grieving because somebody died in my family, I make a piece in honor of them. Instead of making an altar in my house, I make a piece. So that's what the project that I wish someday I had the opportunity to have, like an exhibition, and tell a story about that. My family, what immigrants are in these different countries. We are immigrants, we are all moved everywhere. And I've been living in this country for more than half my life. So it is that you need to adapt to the new country and embrace everything that is good to it, but also bring what you come from and distribute it to everybody to understand where you're coming from. So that's what I wish I can do. So my pieces are mostly inspired in the Day of the Dead, religious imaginary, like Milagro hearts, crosses. This piece that I have here is a mixture of the trees of life in folk art, but I also have a lot of the Virgin of Guadalupe imaginary in them. When I was studying metalsmithing, I was in love with casting because my work is very three-dimensional, so I needed to create it making a wax mold and then do all the process to bake a piece of metal. But then I was introduced to a new material that's what I mainly work on right now, that is metal clay. A lot of bench jewelers don't like this material and they think we're cheating, but I wish they can play with it and they realize that this is not easy. In this package is bronze, but it is powder bronze metal that they mix with organic binders and water, so it feels and it looks like clay. It's not clay, it's metal, okay? But you work it the same way as ceramics. You build it the same way as ceramics. So when I teach my classes with the students in UTSA, the last time I teach was last year, I tell them, for me this is a new way of casting, because we're making our model instead of wax. We are doing it instantly in the clay that is metal already. So when this is finished and it's dry and it's all the detail that you want to do, we need to sinter the metal in a kiln at very high temperatures. And that's when the piece comes out of the kiln and it's solid metal, because we're burning out the binders and the water. So the first time I worked with this, it was silver. The base metals that were not out there in the market, so we were just working with pure silver, and then they came out with sterling silver, and now we have 950, 980. I mean, they have different, consistencies of the silver clay. It's not cheap. It's more expensive than when we buy the sterling sheets or wires because of the process, and it's made mainly in Japan. So we pay the ticket of something that is being made in another country too, and they had to bring the material here. Then this clay came out in the United States, that sadly for everybody that works with the material is not anymore in the market. So I bought a lot of packages because I love to work with bronze. And I'm like, don't tell me that, because I love this material, because it lets me carve in it. And other metals that you can make yourself, I am making my own metal in my studio now. I just buy the powder bronze, and then I mix it with organic binders and a little water. And you have your metal clay and you can play with it. The bad thing with this process is that I cannot carve in it because the consistency is more metal than anything else. So it's like you want to carve in metal using tools that are for ceramics. It's impossible. So I love to carve, and I'm still experimenting in my studio to find the key to make a clay that will be similar to this one that lets me carve. Because if you take a time and take a look at my pieces right there, and we may see some of them, then we can move away.
And you only have a couple, we're going to wrap up in a minute.
Yes. A lot of the work that you see around here, all this is carved in the clay, when it's still clay. The clay is dry, of course, and then you can carve it. But I build the vessel the same way we do when we do fabrication. I build the piece on the top. These have empty spaces because when I sinter my metal, I'm going to be mixing my paperwork. So this is going to have a heart made with paper and hand painted it. And I'm going to build an angel that is going to be on the top. Resembling the folk art from Mexico, the wood carving folk art from Mexico, that's how is this going to look at the end. So that's what it is. I mean, I love this material. And I think we don't need that many tools and big things as we have to do in silversmithing. In my studio, in my house, I can make all these pieces that you see in that table. And I use tools that you will laugh when you see them, because it's nothing major, nothing complicated. The most important tool, as I always tell my students, are your hands. This is your main tool when you work that way. And my students are funny because sometimes they want to do my angels or my little birds that I hand sculpt. But then they get mad because the little bird doesn't look like mine. But I'm like, yeah, because these are my hands, those are your hands. Everybody has different, the way you work. So I'm like, you cannot do what I do. I mean, you will do it your own way, But it's just funny that they are like, oh, yes, you're right. And I'm like, yeah. So I hope you like my talk. I mean, I can talk forever as a good Mexican. But, and this is one of the pieces that I combine my paperwork. This inside is a cabochon that I did with paper, creating a canvas. And then I painted a Day of the Dead image in honor of one of my mentors in San Antonio that passed away in 2018. So this is called Cato Inks. And on the back side, I continue my story. So I am obsessed with the back sides. I have a book that is called Behind the Brooch. And I include a lot of my friends, silversmith friends from the world. And you can take a look at the back side of pieces. I think it's so important, the back side as the front. And all my pieces, if you turn them around, you will see something extra on them. And I will keep making pieces that reflect what I am, because I cannot erase what I am. And I like to educate people and embrace my culture. Mexico is amazing, and the Mexican people are incredible. So
Great. Thank you, Brina. I think we're all going to be using your metaphor about these are my hands, those are yours. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
How long does it take you to make a piece?
It depends. And that's a question that I get a lot when I do shows. How many hours? I have no clue. I enjoy too much what I do. And when you get in your studio and you submerge yourself into that, you may think you've been there 2 hours, and then your husband is like, you've been there the whole freaking day. So some pieces may take me weeks. Some pieces may take me 1 day if I'm obsessed and I cannot move from my desk. So it is very difficult to tell you how many hours. I mean, and that's what always they ask me, how long it took you to make a piece like that. My answer always is almost 20 years. Because that's the time I've been creating jewelry. So yeah.
Amy, did you have a question?
So this is so cool that there's metal clay.
Yeah.
How do you finish it once you're done forming and
You
shaping?
need to burn it in a kiln,
Okay.
like ceramics.
Yeah.
And we need to find a temperature that is gonna sinter the metal again.
Okay.
So you're gonna solidify the particles of the metal. So now that I'm making my own clay, I buy a bag of bronze powder. It's dust. And I'm mixing it with rice starch, things like that, and then water, and you create a clay so that you can work with it.
And then, so each metal must have a temperature?
Yes,
at
different.
which point it
Yes,
must
because the
have
melting point, you need to
melts,
be careful with that.
Okay,
So
interesting.
to sinter bronze, I always go to 1600 degrees and hold it there for 3-4 hours, depending on how big your piece is. I like to ramp my kiln little by little. That's another key. Because some people, they don't have patience. I was one of them. I cannot criticize them. But when I start making jewelry, I learned that patience is a key, So I prefer to wait. I just ignore the kiln. I just go do something else. Sometimes it takes me 9 hours since the beginning of the burning to the end to sinter my pieces. So yeah, you need to have a kiln for that. Yes.
So I've heard of PMC, like the precious metal
Yeah.
before, but I've never heard of anyone making their own.
Yeah.
And I just have to say that that's amazing.
We have to, improvise. 'Cause
How did you, so do you feel you have it honed in now? Like your recipe for your bronze?
this is a lot of experimentation,
Yeah.
I remember we have a discussion in Facebook, of course. there is a group of metalsmithing guys, and I was in the group too, because I do I do fabrication pieces too. And they were criticizing the metal clay community, and they call us the bakers, I think. But I was like, what? Because everybody was tagging me, and I was like, what is going on in Facebook? Why is everybody tagging me? And they were like, and then I saw the comments, and I'm like, oh, okay, so we are bakers now. So I'm like, okay. And I was like, let me write a post and a blog. And I told them, my name is Lorena Angulo. I'm a metal clay artist, and I'm very proud of my cakes. So the issue here, guys, is that the first time we had the metal clay PMC, It was bad for us, for Mitsubishi. They were making the clay. They use it for the cars parts. It's metal, it's powder metallurgy, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay? But they saw a little niche that they could sell that for a craft community. So they brought the product with Tim, my goodness, his name? McCree. He got BMC to the States, and he used first the metal smithing community, and I remember I laughed so much with Bob Evendorf. He didn't know what to do with the crepe, you know. He's like, what is this? What am I supposed to do with this? Because people that are used to hit the metal, bend the metal, solder, they give you a chunk of clay, you're like, what is this? That happened to me when I took my first class. I hated it. I didn't want to deal with it. But then when I got it, I'm obsessed with it, you know. So I know there are a lot of work out there that is made with metal clay that is really, I'm embarrassed to see that. Don't say that you made it, please. Because that's why we have a bad name. It is easy in a way because you can just use a cookie cutter and make a little shape and you do that, you know. But my problem when I was talking to my metal smithing guys, like, I'm not offended if you call me a baker. I know what I am, you know, like whatever. But you can have very crappy and horrible work fabricated too. So it's not the material, it's the person who's making it. So, yes, and there was a guy from Europe that I admire his work. He passed away last year, I think. I think he was from Germany. And he was very outspoken against this community. But he was always commenting about my pictures. Because when I put my pictures out there, I don't say metal clay, because it's clay, it's bronze, it's silver. Why am I gonna put metal clay if it's already a solid metal piece, you know? So he was always complimenting my work. He was in shock when he found out that my work was made with metal clay. You know, so I was like, yes, and because I got obsessed, and maybe because I know the basics of fabrication, I apply the concept of how you fabricate a piece in silver traditional way, and I do it in this way. So, and now PMC is not in the market anymore. So that's why we need to start making our own clays. So at the beginning it was just PMC and Art Clay, the makers. Then everybody got into the role, and now we have clays made in Australia, in Poland, in a lot of countries, and here too. But I prefer to make my own clay.
That's amazing.
It's not that difficult. Silver is very expensive though. You need to buy the powder too. But for now, because I'm able to make big pieces, and they are not as expensive in material-wise, so I use base metals, bronze and copper.
I think we have another question right here too.
I've got two quick questions. So first, while you were talking about your clay metal piece and it was up on, we were seeing your Instagram, I couldn't help but just wondered what the paper element of it looked like. So if it's easy for you to pull up, you know, I'd love to see it.
Yes, you can put some
And then
pictures.
also, you know, your pieces sound so personal, just, you know, they're informed by your losses and experience. Like, what's that like to sell something that is so personal?
It's not easy. At the beginning, every piece I made, my husband was like, so what is the point in you making pieces? Because I was not selling anything. And I think the first piece ever that I finally got it, the material, because I didn't like to work with metal clay. I was like, nah, I'm not gonna do that. But my mentor, she was the chair of the metals department in Southwest School of Art, Claire Holiday. She told me, Lorena, you need to keep working with metal clay because I know you will be good with it. I was like, okay, I'm gonna take another class, but I was like a little kid, I don't wanna do this because I hate to have my hands dirty. And with that, as clay, you know, your hands are dirty all the time. So I was washing my hands like 300 times a day. So my first piece that I did, that was, if you go on the top, maybe, there is a section that says paper.
Okay.
Yeah, we may have some samples there. Hopefully we can download it.
And then we'll have to wrap up here in a second after we go through here.
See, you can move them more. I think they're almost at the end. Because that's clay, that's regular clay.
Okay.
That piece that I have, that's paper. So that's paper, and then if you move up more, you may see what that's again. That's paper.
Wow.
That's the way I start making my pieces, carve them. And then at the end you start painting them. And then you cover them with resin. and then you need to apply them to your metal piece.
I'll leave it at that.
But yeah, but it's not easy to sell them, of course. I make a big Milagro heart in silver. I went to a gallery in Kerrville, Texas, and to deliver my pieces because they were on consignment. And I didn't want to put that heart. I was going to lose my heart. But my husband Lorena just leave it. So I put it super high, like it's not going to sell. I'm just going to put it high so it doesn't sell. On my way back to San Antonio, the gallery called me. She's like, Lorena, we have good news for you. And I'm like, what? We saw your heart. I was crying on my way down to my house, like, Mommy, you saw my heart. But my husband, Lorena, you saw a very good piece. And I'm like, yeah, but now, I embrace them for a while, and I just send them away.
Well, thank you, Lorena. We're going to have to move on. Thank you so much. Awesome. Thank you so much, Lorena. That was fascinating. Next up, we have Brooke Kapowski. Wait. Pusiak, which you would think, because I'm also Czech, you'd think I would know this better. And Brooke is a clay artist as well. I'll pass that to you. Turn this off.
Hello. Thank you guys for listening to me tonight and giving me your attention. It is very exciting to be here. I am Brooke Pusiak. I am a ceramicist, but I mostly do multidisciplinary work. I'm currently going to school at the University of Houston for photography. However, I'm not showing my photography work tonight. I'm showing something more similar of a visual diary entry. I've decided at the end of 2024 that I wanted to consume my time going into 2025 a little better than I had been. I would roughly accumulate around 3 to 4 hours on my phone every single day, which is horrible because that is a lot of time that you could spend doing something different. And so I started thinking about all the things I could be doing within 3 to 4 hours. And I got a very quick thought that was I could sculpt a dog every day. And so I started doing that. I've made a few different sketches for some dogs, but I have some very small ones here. They're very sweet. They're very dear to me. But I've made one every single day alongside of working full-time, going to school, and existing outside of clay. I make them at my apartment, so they're very small in size currently. However, I'm excited to keep continuing this series and watching them grow and get bigger. They have been very dear to me. I enjoy just being able to create something that feels so true to who I am, and not that I am a dog, of course, but that I can look at each one of these individual dogs and say, I know exactly what happened on the day that I made this. Like my little sleeping dog that I have over here, I was woken up by my partner and I was really grumpy that day and I just wanted to go back to sleep, so I just made a tiny sleepy dog. And I really enjoy having a method or just a medium like this where I can choose however or whatever I would like to do with it. And my day really does inform the dog, as well as I am very interested by other mediums. So it's not just going to be clay every day, hopefully. However, for this past month, it has been just to get a better understanding of the shape and the form. But I'm very interested in felted wool. I, again, do photography, so I have been interested in exploring photographic methods and printing it, which is why I was really interested in Ryan's work. And then I also would like to incorporate this into some of my bigger dream pieces to make. Like I've always wanted to make a ceramic lamp, and so I have really enjoyed having a project that forces me to create every single day and give my time to something a little more fruitful than just spending it on my phone and watching our world's conditions. So yeah, thank you.
Why did you choose a dog to be your subject?
I don't know. I had sculpted a few dogs before, and so I knew in the back of my head that it is something that has been a very not quick process, but it's something that I can slightly understand how to do. And even if I don't fully understand it, I imagine by the end of the process, like I can get them to be more of a cohesive style. And I don't know, the dog just resonated with me. It's similar if I don't like doing self-portraits because I know what I look like. And so I have cats and like I know what they look like all too well. So like if I mess it up, it's a little too real. So I enjoy having them, and sometimes they look more equestrian than dog-like, but they're very sweet to me nonetheless.
Do you sculpt them with a certain glaze or color in mind as well?
No, not entirely. I make a sketch for it. The sketch usually informs the form that I'm going to make. It doesn't really have any say on the glaze. Typically, the glaze is just experimentation, which is what I've been very excited about doing this month, is just having something to continuously experiment with. But going forward, I want to have more of a cohesive style. But I don't even just do these types of dogs. Typically, like, there will be like a diary entry that accompanies it, so it does also share the story of why I chose to do that dog for that day. Yeah.
Awesome. I got a question back in the corner.
How has your relationship to your phone changed?
Good question.
I hate being on my phone right now, specifically after like the turn of like mid-January. I found that being on my phone is really awful. And so it's a really great excuse to like get off of it, and it has decreased down to a total of like 30 to 50 minutes a day, which is really good. Yeah, but it's definitely changed my relationship. It's also made me want to promote my work and spend my time on my phone a little differently, instead of looking at other people's art, posting about my work, and being more invested in the work that I'm creating. Yeah.
So this is sort of like maybe like a question about, this is a project sort of in a way of documentation, right? So you're using the dog as a way to document your day.
Yeah.
So at the end of the project, do you have any thoughts about documentation of this documentation? Like, how do you see it living after you've made 365 dogs with diary?
I've heard that pun. I've heard that pun now. But I didn't have like a specific method of like documenting it all the way up until the end. I knew that I wanted to start slowly documenting it, and so starting in February, I was going to start posting them to Instagram, just to see if I can build up any traction around my dogs. And I was going to have that just kind of existing as like my space to post and keep all my dogs. But currently they are just sitting on a shelf at my apartment, and I imagine it's probably going to stay that way until if somebody ever wanted to take them off my hands from me, or unless I decided like there was something bigger and better for them.
When did you start the project?
January 1st.
I was wondering, so do you hope to go the whole calendar year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's 365 or 4. I don't know if it's a leap year or not. Okay, well.
Awesome.
Thank
Any more
you.
questions for Brooke?
Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. I love thinking about making as a meditation process. It goes back to your, Naomi's start with yoga and coming back and helping us to get off our phones more. This is wonderful. So we have one last presenter tonight. So thank you all for being here. Our last presenter is Megan Randall, who's a glass artist.
Like other things.
Let me pull this up for you.
So bear with me, because I saw this and it was such a beautiful opportunity, and I just got a really great studio, and so I have so much more space, and I've kind of just blown up with all my creativity. I do basically any material that I am curious about, I do it. And I don't take a class, I don't like look it up or anything. I usually just trial by error. And it started really with the inspiration of my mom and my grandmother. My grandmother had a full ride to art school, music school, and hair school. And because she was told she could never be a famous artist, she went to hair school. And it was one of those stories that she told me when I switched my major from biology to art history and doing studio art. And so it was one of those things where it felt like a bigger than me thing. And I wanted to teach myself all these different skills that women have done, so I started quilting, I started embroidering, I started using glass, I started doing all these different things. And then Roe happened, and I'm going to say it in the most political way I can, I felt female rage. And it was this weird thing of how do I explain these feelings in a way that really reaches people? And so you know, a lot of people, they either love or hate my work. That's been mostly the consensus. But today, because of the time constraints, I can really only talk about one series that I'm working on. So this is called Peeping Tom, and the way that I went about it is I kind of wanted the viewer to almost feel like they're involved in the lack of consent. So you are the Peeping Tom in the piece. And I went about it by creating this window frame. This is like the finished piece right here. I created this window frame out of almost like this like foam, and then I covered it in fabric, and then I embroidered and I used ink and a bunch of other things to kind of create that classic like landlord special pull-up window. And then the inside of it, that's actually my little sister. So that's kind of, it didn't really start that way, it kind of evolved. I started just drawing a woman's, like a girl's figure, and it looked like her, and it was kind of this weird, that was kind of where my mind was. I was worried about her, so it was kind of a cool accident. But the point of it, this one's called Divine Intervention, and it was, I kept on hearing the conversation revolve around religion as an excuse for people putting themselves into other people's lives, when in reality I was researching all these different religions and researching like the laws and how they were changing all over the country, and it felt, first of all, separation of church and state, but also it just felt like every point of those religions was to not judge and to care about people and to be a support, and it just felt like it was being thrown in people's faces for no reason. And so I was like, what could I do that kind of create this way of like almost using it against the person doing it, like a reminder almost. So that's basically what's happening. She's sitting in her bedroom and she's looking straight at you, looking at her through the window, and behind her there's these like different like religious objects that kind of, again, like they're staring at you just like she's staring at you. So it was this was like the first of like one that I wanted to do a series of, and the whole point is it was going to go in this show called Bed and Breakfast that I'm working on, where eventually I want to create this house environment where each room like resonates with different stories of women throughout my life, that I've talked to, stories that I've seen in Texas especially. And so continuing that, I was like, okay, what other windows did I want to like peek into? And so one of the things that's really shocking is that child marriage is still legal in like a bunch of states. And a lot of people don't know about it or talk about it or in any way conversate about it. And it's really concerning that people don't want to illegalize it. So I kind of put it into this like situation here where it's almost like you're passing by the window and she's staring at you. And I actually used a dress that I wore when I was a kid to my uncle's wedding, and it was almost like a wedding dress looking dress, and so I used that. And then basically it's like this really beautiful like almost honeymoon suite room where it's like a heart door, and it almost kind of just puts you in this really uncomfortable place where it's beautiful to look at, but you know there's something wrong. And then the next one is called Meeting Your Heroes. And that one was kind of a really interesting thing. Like, I know recently you've probably heard of like just like the epic battle between Drake and like the whole US. Honestly. So like it was kind of this thing where then like you saw Elvis and Doja Cat did like her song where she's literally talking about these things. And it's like progressively you're realizing that a lot of people that we idolize aren't perfect. And in fact, you wouldn't want to be near them in real life. And so like this idolization that comes from that, you grow up and you realize that it was really misplaced. And it's like, how did you not see it? So this is like a window where she's basically in her bedroom and she's got these posters on the wall, and I haven't decided exactly who I want to put on the posters, but I kind of want it to be readable to this time period. I do a lot of like almost meshing of time periods, especially ones that are really significant in women's rights. So like color palette, the furniture, the clothes, the makeup, the hair, all of that. It kind of almost like meshes like modern style versus those different time periods. It's kind of referencing going backwards and going forwards at the same time. But yeah, and so she's like just going to bed, and like you can see it. It's like meeting your heroes is like not what you really want. And so yeah, so that's just like the two pieces I've already thought of for the series, but I plan on doing like a bunch of them, and they're different like sizes. I want this one to be big, like me size. And yeah, basically these are going to be like sprinkled throughout the show that I'm planning, and it's, again, each piece is like this portal into a different feminine experience where I'm fetishizing misogyny into a way where it's like it's brutally obvious that there's something wrong, and if it's not wrong, that's something you should think about. But yeah, so that's this. Yeah.
Thank you, Brad. Does anyone have any questions for Meg? These seem very large scale. Do they stand out from the wall?
Yeah.
Too?
Yeah, so again, I love the materiality aspect. I don't want it to seem super realistic. I want it to feel still like an art piece. And so the whole point was for it to almost come out of the wall and like force you to notice it, force you to watch it and look at it. My other pieces, though, they're more either like flush to the wall, or in a sense, I do like embroidery on paintings to like emphasize certain emotions or symbolism to tell the story. I'm a really big storyteller. I think that that's such a quick way to get to someone, is when you put these really like reasonably iconic symbolism from different periods. That's the art historian in me. So sometimes I'll sprinkle a little bit of art history. Like if you are familiar with Woman House, I'm really inspired by that project. And just those people. And a lot of my work is the idea that the feminist art movement shouldn't have been this thing where it's this small period of time. Like there's still women to this day that have something to say, and they're not being heard. And it just goes to show that movement, what's the purpose of making it that small part of it, kind of thing. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm just so impressed by how smart or like intellectually curious like this work is. And so for when these are presented, like would you have more of a description? I feel like I've learned a lot just in these 5 minutes, and like I really enjoyed that type of education. So like how much narrative or description could you include?
I get this question a lot, and it's always one of those things where it's like, again, I want to be a curator. I've curated a couple of shows here in Houston, and the to didact or not to didact kind of question. I think it gets weirdly controversial when I've talked about it with other curators. I think that knowledge is power, and I think that the main purpose of my work is to bring knowledge to people about situations. A lot of people, they respond to my work where they said, like, I hate religion. And that's not true. I find it fascinating. And I find people that believe in something that's greater than themselves important. I don't like people that use religion as this, like, cape that they can use against people. I think that that's not what it's supposed to be used for. And so when I do didactics on this, my point is to it's really important on how I would express that information. I don't know if I would want to do something where like you could listen to something, or perhaps it's on the wall, but I want it to really feel like a house environment. So it almost would feel to art gallery, art museum vibe. But yeah, that's a really good question. I'm still not there yet on that. Honestly, like I'm planning on writing a grant write-up for this whole thing. It's been like 2 years that I've been planning is like 60% of what I do, and then the other 10% that I do is me messing up and having to figure out a way around it, and then the rest of it is the execution phase of it. So most of my planning is based in academia and history and how I can pay homage to past female artists that really pioneered the things that I'm trying to talk about and do. In a way that's very prevalent to what's going on. It's really enlightening to hear so many artists being moved by the situations that are happening currently with their work, with how passionate they seem to get about it, it makes me feel less alone, because I know my work is very political and a lot of people have very mixed reactions to that. So yeah, thank you guys. You guys are awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Well, I want to thank you all for taking the time to come out tonight and learn about our community here in Houston. Thank you to everyone who presented. I loved all the connections that we're already making and the stories that are being told, so this is really wonderful. I just want to let you know we have another artist program next month in February. We have a resident artist talk. Adam is right here. Adam will be giving a resident artist talk with our resident Benga, who was here earlier. His studio's right here. That'll be on February 22nd. It's a Saturday at 3 p.m. in this room. So please join us to learn more about their work as well. We still have about 30 minutes of this event, so if you want to get a drink, look at the retail, look at the exhibition, look at everyone's art, chat, please do. Thank you for coming.